What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Ton of stuff going on, as always. It seems this hobby never really slows down. Let's start, I suppose, with Robo-Frenzy. After the untimely demise of my development computer that I've been using to work on the multi-bingo for the past couple years here, I decided to devote my energy to working on Robo-Frenzy. Of course, this comes after I finished the 4 card-themed bingos, and I've got those set up in code and ready to install in the multi-bingo when the playfield is ready. So, the timing really couldn't have been much better. That computer I'd been working hard for quite some time, and it was starting to feel that way before it decided to just completely die. But at any rate, all good things come to an end, I suppose. And I'm going to wait for a couple weeks and save up some money and get the computer that I need rather than something just to fill the void. So, while I'm waiting on that, I've been working on Robo-Frenzy. I've been devoting at least 15 minutes a night to it. I got sick somewhere in the middle of there. My sickness was pretty abbreviated, but it was still enough to knock me down a bit. And so 15 minutes I thought was a reasonable goal. I didn't have to get too committed. And of course, committing to at least 15 minutes meant that in reality it was more like 2 hours anytime I came down here. So I've got a nice work table in one of my pinball machines over here. I've got the schematic rolled out on top of it, and I'm just checking through wires, marking them with the wire color, and making sure that everything makes sense. I've come across a couple of things that have to be redrawn in the schematic, and I'm penciling those in. So version 1 of my schematic assumes a 24-volt system, but with how things shook out, I ended up using 50-volt coils in the game, and so I decided that I'll just run a dual transformer system, one 24-volt and one 50-volt. So that's what I've done, and I am basically marking those 50-volt coils on the schematic as such, and writing a new hot and a new common, and tying them together. Unfortunately, some of them are buried in the middle of the schematic, which is pretty inconvenient, but it is what it is. So, aside from that, I've spent some time kind of cleaning up some of the bits and bobs. So I've gone through and wired all the commons in the system, which is basically all the hot side. I call it commons because, of course, every coil shares that same lead. But the true common side, the one that feeds back into the transformer, actually is in the middle of the schematic. So hot is tied to one side of the coil, and then common feeds through via various switches. So I call it common, but it's really not. It's the hot side. So each of these coils is tied together, and I've mounted the trip banks in the top of the cab. I had thought about putting them down lower because, of course, it's very tight with the back door closed and the 2 large 6-position trip banks mounted up top. But unfortunately, I don't quite know the size and shape of the wheel mechanism that's going to allow for the player to position themselves. So I didn't want to put anything there that could encroach on that later, especially since I'm laying wire at this point. I didn't want to attach it to the front for fear that the player would be able to cheat in some way, either by kicking the machine or using a magnet of some kind. I'm trying to think this through as if it were being made. Of course, this is a ridiculous design that is way too complicated to actually be made in electromechanical. So I'm trying to make it as good as I can. And so far I'm feeling pretty good. So 24 volts are all wired. All my 50 volts are wired. And I'm just running through all the logic switches now. And I've got score reels separated, completely desoldered, and ready to go. So I'm looking forward to getting a couple of those wired in as well, and playing around with the reset sequence and making sure that it actually functions as intended. To that goal, I purchased a router thanks to one of the followers of the Pinside thread about the build. I was lamenting the fact that I didn't have a router and that I didn't really know how to use one, and someone said, hey, they're only $30 today. So I went ahead and got one of those, and it's a small handheld deal, and got some tips for it, and hopefully I'll be able to cut some good things like the power switch hole that I need, as well as the mounting position for the power cord. That's got to run out the back door somehow. So I'll update further on that as I go. Of course, the router's main purpose is going to be to cut the lamp shields for the back glass. That's going to be quite a job, so we'll see if this thing is up to the task. Hopefully so, though. More on that as it develops. So I should have wiring pretty much finished in the next few weeks. Might be 2 or 3 episodes before it's completely done, because somewhere in there I need to actually wire up the lamp sockets, which I have not done any of yet. I need to go out and I'm going to get 2 quarter-inch pieces of ply and route out one, and the other one I'm going to drill to install the lamp sockets, and then I'm going to glue them together. And hopefully that provides a robust enough surface for the lamps, and enough shadow that the light box for the lamps looks good on the back glass, but we'll have to see. So there may be some experimentation there. I've got to get a hinge that'll work for the game, and some other bits and bobs and sundries like that, but things are coming along. I can see where this is going to shape up, and I'm looking forward to that. In other news, just made a deal for a one-ball horse race playfield. The playfield that I am receiving came out of a Turf King, which I'm very familiar with, and my plan is to implement the one-ball games in the multi-bingo. There are a few dedicated collectors of the one-ball games, but they are few and far between compared to the bingos, which themselves are few and far between compared to, say, Gottlieb Wedgeheads. So it's going to be quite the journey. I have paperwork for some of the old games, and have been looking at that. Unfortunately, a lot of the crucial information is not documented in either the manual or schematic for these games. Specifically, what amounts to the spotting disc. The way a lot of these work is you insert a coin, and a motor spins and stops, and where it stops is what you get, and that's it. The later games like Turf King have one of the best advantages, which is guaranteed advancing odds. So some of the earliest games, you drop a coin, and maybe it jumps right to the highest odds. Your next coin, it jumps somewhere in the middle. It can go down. But on Turf King, they always go up. A pretty big deal, but of course, part of the charm of those older games is knowing when to stop. So I'm looking forward to getting these games implemented, and my current plan is to implement them in the multi itself. The playfields for the one-ball games are larger, typically, than a standard bingo playfield, so I'll have to see if it fits within the cab. If not, I'll have to build a cab to hold it. But I'm attempting to avoid that expense if I can, and make it a little more convenient. Just have one system to swap playfields in and out of. So some of the games have two different versions, similar to the bingos, where there could be multiple versions, one that automatically plays, replays, and the other which accepts coins, and the replays stay on the machine. So in these one-ball games, the two different versions are replay, which operate like a bingo or a standard flipper game where you push a start button and a replay comes off the meter and you're playing the game. The other version is payout, and only one of the bingos, as far as I'm aware, had a factory option to install a payout hopper, and that's Bahama Beach. None of the others had that option, although I've seen plenty of games that have been modified aftermarket to include a payout hopper. Some of those come from Las Vegas, as far away as there, even though I'm out here in Virginia. So it's pretty interesting to see, just how far these games travel. But the payout for the one balls is pretty interesting. It works kind of like a slot machine, pre-hopper. But I'm thinking what I could do to simulate that effect would be to have an optional hopper that can attach under the cabinet, similar to where the button drawer installs. So you could either install the button drawer or you could install the payout hopper. And I think that would be kind of fun to have both options. But I'll have to see what kind of parts I can find. Of course, I can get a hopper. The big problem that I have with hopper is that it's huge and very heavy. But it could work. The other thing I could do is install coin tubes and then install some kind of slot machine payout mechanism. I think that may be easier, but of course from a computer's perspective, the hopper is probably easier because you just turn on a relay, spin until it's paid out enough coins. That's pretty straightforward, actually, as far as code goes. So we'll see. I am still in the parts collecting phase. Right now, I've got a really gorgeous playfield coming, and that's going to get me jazzed to write the games. And once they're written, I can work on improvements like setting up both the payout and non-payout versions of these games. And of course, the non-payout is all that would be playable at a pinball show. But I can go ahead and write them and have them and play them myself at my home. So looking forward to that. Okay, so in other multi-news, of course, I'm waiting on the computer. That'll happen one of these days soon. And while I'm waiting, I've got plenty of playfields to wire, and I'm working on a deal for a lot of parts that I need. In fact, that is pretty solid. Hopefully, if all things go well, this weekend I'll have almost all the parts that I have left for the multi. And once that happens, I can really begin wiring the alternate playfields. I am, in particular, waiting on some things that are required in order to wire some of these playfields. So hopefully having that stuff will make a big difference. We shall see. And the last bit of news, just as far as EM stuff that's going on, I got a new game tonight. It's pretty surprising to me because I am laughably out of space. I mean, there is absolutely nowhere for me to put this thing. But a deal came up and I couldn't pass it up. A Gottlieb Sing-Along, which is one of my favorite games, came up at a very good price. The backlash is really nice. The cabinet has had some work done to it. I think it got wet at some point in the past, and some parts of it have been replaced. That said, they did a reasonable job on the cabinet. The playfield has had a lot of wear and a lot of touch-up, and that is not quite as good. But that said, I'm looking forward to having a sing-along of my very own. I really love that game. I find the gameplay very compelling, so hopefully I'll have that fixed up at some point and on legs. Right now it's folded up, but one of these days soon I should have a little bit more space, and we'll see what I can do there. So I'm building Robo-Frenzy in the middle of the aisle, and I've got Sing-Along down at the other end of the aisle. You can kind of squeeze past both of them and play some of the games right now. But that said, I haven't played one of my own games in many weeks. So it's about time for me to do that. I have a couple more things I need to do to a couple of the games. And once those are done, I should have some free time, hopefully, to be able to just come down here and veg out a little bit and play some games. I haven't had that luxury really since York. I've been working on fixing games or working on other games around town and just have not had a chance. So that's going to be exciting. It's kind of silly to say that I'm looking forward to playing my own games, but I am. Especially the multi. I mean, I haven't really played that since York. So I need to get back into that, and hopefully I'll stream a little gameplay too, show you all some different bingos that are hard to find, or that are unusual or have interesting features, or that I just find very compelling. There's quite a few of them. For today's year of Flipperless, let's talk about Bally's 1941 Fairmont. Fairmont is one of the one-ball horse race games, and a beautiful example has been partially documented by a man named Craig on the Woodrail Pinball Machines Facebook group. So I thought I'd go over this game because it's very impressive for the time period. This is 9 years before Turf King, and some of the features in this game are just mind-boggling. So it's a horse race game, and the playfield is divided into sections: purse, show, place, and win. And your goal is to match the selection that's lit at random with the particular hole that you land in one of those sections. And depending on where you land and the odds which are lit on the backglass at the time, you'll win the corresponding number of nickels. Right from the beginning, this game is fairly unique. Bally contracted with Puget Sound Novelty Company, and what they developed was this thing called the Schnabel Coin Master. It must have been named after somebody. I can't figure out why it's named Schnabel, other than it would have been somebody's last name. But what this is, it's a pretty ingenious device. If you've played an older game, you know that one of the weaknesses of those older games is the coin slide. It's, of course, an indelible part of early pinball, is pushing in that coin slide, feeling the game reset underneath you, and pulling the slide back out. It's pretty neat, and there's very few things which are like it. Of course, the automatic resets of later games where you drop a coin in a chute and then it just takes care of the rest is, pretty neat as well. But there's something about pushing in that coin slide and feeling it, if you know what I'm saying. So the weakness of these, of course, is that the player can hold the game in a reset state, or the coin mechanism can become jammed. The coin mechanism being the slide itself. This is far more dangerous when it's mechanically controlling the reset sequence. If you think about it, perhaps there are relays which are built to drop out almost immediately. Things like, a reset relay. Well, the game knows that it is engaged and so tries to drop it immediately, and it can't. If the coin slide is wedged in the furthest point, then unfortunately the game can't reset. The coil keeps trying to trip and cannot, and therefore the coil will burn. If you're lucky, the fuse will blow. If you're unlucky, the game will catch on fire. So the interesting thing about this Schnabel Coin Master is that they tried to solve this problem, and the way they did it was with this gear reduction system, as Craig describes it on Facebook. And it sounds like a vacuum cleaner. It's a very loud motor, and when you put in the coin, this motor spins up, and all that it does is through a series of different gears, it rotates this metal arm, which is laid out horizontally. And this metal arm has a knob on the end, and what this knob does is push what amounts to half of a coin slide, and it pushes into the shutter and resets the game. That's pretty unique, because there's no way for it to jam, at least under the user's influence. Of course, the operator could throw a bunch of gunk on the arm or the cam inside, or the gears, and prevent that motor from turning, but as it is designed, there should be no way for the coin mechanism to jam. It's pretty novel, especially in 1941. So what you're essentially talking about is an automatic reset system like those games from the 1950s, 1960s. However, it's done via a gigantic motor. It's pretty cool. So let's talk about the gameplay of Fairmont, because I find this very interesting as well. Keep in mind, again, this is 9 years before Turf King, and I've been over the features of that before, and there are quite a few, but the features of this game are very, very interesting. This game does not have guaranteed advancing odds. It's too early for that. That was an invention of Don Hooker, and he invented that after Fairmont was produced. He came on, it's my understanding, just a year or two before Turf King was made, and that is one of the first guaranteed advancing odds games. So, one-ball horse race games before then, and I mentioned actually earlier in this episode, if you put in a coin, there's no guarantee what odds you'll get. It could go down to the very lowest odds, even though you were at the highest with the last nickel. So, as I mentioned before, you have to kind of know when to play and when not to play. Perhaps your selection is terrible, but your odds are great. So sometimes you want to take a chance. So aside from the random selection of odds, you also have the random selection of the selection, which is the actual horse that you're trying to land the ball into that hole. But there's also a way to multiply your odds, and it's based on the number of coins that have been inserted, and it's up to 4 coins. Changes the way this multiplier works. Unfortunately, the instruction card on IPDB is pretty blurry, so I'm not able to see exactly how that works, but I assume this is some kind of proto method to secure these multiple coins in an instance where your odds started out at a fairly high amount. So, other than that, there are lettered bumpers on the playfield in the upper left, upper right, lower left, and lower right. Those are marked A, B, C, and D, and you have to hit them sequentially. Once you do, then all 7 selections will light, and essentially any hole you put it into will be a winner. There are also trophy holes down at the bottom, and I'm not certain what they do on this game, but I believe what they'll do is light all selections next game. Next, let's talk about the other 2 bumpers which are on this playfield. That's right, there's 6 on here. In between A, B, C, and D, right in the middle of the playfield on the edges, are 2 other passive bumpers. They will light at random, and if you hit it while lit, it will give you the next letter in sequence. So say you had A lit already because you had hit that one, but you just could not hit B. If you manage to hit one of those randomly lit passive bumpers in the middle, it'll give you B, and then next you have to hit C. That's a huge deal. That's really, really cool. Having played quite a bit of Turf King, I can tell you sometimes you just need one more letter in order to get past your player's block, and you just can't get it no matter what you do. So that would be an extremely powerful feature. It's kind of a gimme if you've been pumping money into this thing for a while. Another interesting feature is that on each of the sections, purse, show, place, and win, there is an odd-looking lamp tower right in the center of that section, and it's underneath the number 4 hole, which is always in the center of these playfields. This lamp tower will light at random in one of the sections, and if you happen to land anywhere in that section while that is lit, then you earn the corresponding number of nickels, even though you didn't necessarily hit your selection. That is a really neat feature, and one that I desperately wish that I had sometimes. The game itself is gorgeous. Beautiful wooden cabinet, floor length, wood rail. The playfield artwork is phenomenal. There are small jockeys riding horses. The actual figures themselves of the jockey and horse are small, not just the jockey, of course. And the background artwork is a just explosion of color in each of the sections. It's extremely eye-catching. Looking at the back glass, there's a beautiful horse race scene, which is underneath the odds section. And each of these selections is very large and bright and colorful, just as it is on Turf King and many of the other one-ball games. Your A, B, C, D are arrayed at the top, right in the center above the odds, and then the trophies are to the left and right. And when those are lit and you hit the hole again, I presume it lights all selections for next game. Unfortunately, I don't know that for sure. Hopefully I can clarify, and I'll get back to you on that. It was a wonderful game. From what Craig says, only 2 are known to exist. So if you happen to have a Bally Fairmont 1941, reach out, let me know. I'd be interested to see it and hear your take on the machine. And that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to me on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, Google Play Music, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, also at Bingo Podcast, or you can listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.